Phiri, as shared by some people who knew him quite well in his hometown. A little bit earlier on, I spoke to Sean Brokensha, who's also known as the music guru, and he began by telling me what contribution Ray Phiri will be remembered for.
Well, you know, we use the word legend and we use the word icon. We use them all too lightly these days, but Ray Phiri truly was a giant of South African music on many levels. His career overlapped from the time before freedom right into the new South Africa, and he epitomized the new South Africa, even though his career began very early. And it starts in 1947. It starts in a very humble dwelling. His father was from Malawi. His name was Just Now, and little Ray was born. And his dad, to make a living, he had a guitar, and he had a woman that worked with him, and they had a puppet, a marionette with strings, and they would play guitar for tourists, whoever went by. And little Ray would start copying the puppet, and he developed this dance all on his own. He had a great fascination for his dad's guitar, but Dad said, you can't touch it because it's the only source of income for this family, so you're not allowed near it. Of course, he stole the guitar, he broke the strings, got into a world of trouble, and his father exacted a promise from him that he would actually become a musician, but he'd pay for it himself. So he started working as a gardener after school, and he's a kid now, he's 8, 9, 10. He makes enough money, he walks the 5 kilometers to Nelspruit, he buys his first book, it's a guitar primer with all the chords in it. And then he saves up again and buys a guitar. In the interim, he has the strangest influence because he's obviously steeped in a tradition that includes jazz, it includes fusion, mbakanga. It's very much a South African tradition of music. But because of where he is in Mpumalanga, he listens to Radio LM. Those old days, and he hears country and western, he hears Jim Reeves, he hears Elvis Presley, and he starts developing a style and a liking for the American way of playing guitar. It would be that echo that would catch Paul Simon's eye, and yeah, much later. Story. That's the Graceland story. But going back to his early days, he was a kid that was determined to succeed, and he was going to do everything it took. At the age of 15, it's 1962 now. And he's also been working as a dancer on the street to try and make a bit of money. The Dark City Girls come to town. So it's an agricultural show. You can picture it. It's Nelspruit and Mbombela, and they're all doing their thing. He forces his way onto stage and does his puppet dance. And people love him so much that they give him 35 Rand in appreciation. Takes that money and makes his way to Johannesburg. First of all, he gets a job working in Modderby prison through his uncle as a cleaner and a cook. He then gets a slightly better job working in Sandton as a construction worker. But the big time was about to come. The big time came when he started a band called the Cannibals, who are regarded as soul legends in this country. Even if Graceland hadn't have happened, he would be a legend. This is why I'm saying he's a giant. And he was a consummate guitar player and an arranger and a hard worker. And people just loved Ray Phiri. He disbanded the Cannibals and formed the very famous Stimela. Now we take the story forward a bit, and let's get to Paul Simon. Now, how did Paul Simon put him on an international stage? Well, Paul Simon at that point in 1984 is in a very low state. He's divorcing his wife, Carrie Fisher. His album Hearts and Bones has flopped completely, and this was, after the big concert in the park, and Paul Simon was big news, and suddenly Paul Simon was a damn squib. Yeah. And so he was looking around for inspiration. He'd got this tape. It was called Gumboots. It was by the Boyoyo Boys, but a bunch of other people as well. It was a compilation tape. It had been lent to him. He heard this and he was captivated. He didn't know what it was, but it totally grabbed him. Particularly that southern sound to the guitar. Where did it come from? It reminded him of the Mississippi Delta. So he did inquiries in America. He got hold of a guy called Hilton Rosenthal, who was from Johannesburg but had relocated. And Hilton set up this schedule in Joburg. And he was going to be here for 2 weeks. And he went to various studios and he was going to meet people who were both on the tape but also the movers and shakers. Yeah. And he was pointed towards Ray Phiri as the go-to guy. Yeah, the 2 weeks only lasted 10 days because the police found out what he was doing. He got into a world of trouble because of it through the United Nations. Yeah. But there were two sides to it. And the amazing thing is that South Africans in exile and South African local musicians, with possibly the exception of Jonas Gwanga, who said, why do we need a white musician to discover black music? But apart from that, what he did is recognized as being groundbreaking. It opened the door for a lot of things, and it opened the door for Ray, most definitely.
So Stimela was legend,
yes.
And a lot of people remember Stimela. But there was a point in time where a new South Africa dawned, and Stimela enjoyed its moment.
Yes.
What did Ray then do in the later
Well, Ray,
years?
I mean, if you think of Ray as the consummate guitarist, ever evolving and ever plucking his tune according to the mood of the time. Well, Graceland was a huge success, quite obviously, and he had a huge role to play in Graceland. And Stimela itself can't be discounted lightly. In the height of the struggle, he was in the belly of the beast. And his music, like a lot of musicians in the 80s, they had to actually couch their message through what seemed to be just pop, innocent pop music. But there were so many instances where they were communicating a message of the struggle. And he did that through Stimela. He got Whispers in the Deep was banned by the SABC, and this actually made him notorious and made him a household name in this country. And after the success of Graceland, he actually went with Paul Simon back to New York. And Call Me Elle, for example. Now, that guitar riff is possibly the sound of 1986. You know, that doom, 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 doom. It says so much for so many people who heard it at that time. And he worked with Paul Simon as part of his band. He worked on the Rhythm of the Saints album. He also went on tour, on several tours. Then he came back home. He started performing with his own unit, Ray Phiri and Friends. And he kept on performing, and his music kept on changing, and he was the most wonderful guy in terms of not only his own music, but helping other people. He was signed by Gallo Records, and people like Yvonne Chaka Chaka, the person that they sent to teach about the music industry was always Ray. He was the guy. He was the uncle. He was the guy who'd come from the grassroots, and he knew how to do things the right way. And he continued performing up until his death. He'd been booked for gigs later this year, and that was just his work ethic. He was going to work until the end.
Wow. It's a pity we've had to end this conversation because it's been a lifetime of work and contribution, and to reduce it to a couple of minutes is almost sad. But thanks very much for giving us this wonderful insights and this man that's going to be missed by many, Ray Phiri. Sean, thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you, Peter. Cheers.
Welcome back. Quick Athletics Sports Bulletin, but we do begin